live now. We can start any minute. Good morning, everyone. Welcome all to the ICR Day Function 2021. We are celebrating the 137th of the founder and 94th anniversary of MLD, sir. I will request Dr. Kumar Davle, sir, to kindly start the program with the introductory remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Keyur. And I wish all of you who have joined on the virtual platforms of Zoom as well as on YouTube.
Sir, prayer we can.
What happened?
Prayer.
Yeah. So I welcome all of you to this 137th founder and 94th of MLD functions. I shall request Sujata to offer the prayer, institutional prayer.
हमको मन की शक्ति देना, मन विजय करे, दूसरों की जैसे पहले खुद को जय करे। हमको मन की शक्ति देना, भेद भाव अपने दिल से साफ कर सके, दोस्तों से भूल हो तो माफ कर सके, झूठ से बचे रहे, सच कदम भरे, दूसरों की जैसे पहले खुद को जय करे। हमको मन की शक्ति देना, मुश्किलें पड़े तो हम पे इतना कर्म कर, साथ दे जो धर्म का, चले तो धर्म पर, खुद पे हौसला रहे, बदी से ना डरे, दूसरों की जैसे पहले खुद को जय करे। हमको मन की शक्ति देना, मन विजय करे, दूसरों की जैसे पहले खुद को जय करे। हमको मन की शक्ति देना। Thank you.
Thank you, Sujata. This is the second year that we are meeting on a virtual platform to celebrate the Founders Day and the ICR Day. And we are very, very fortunate that we have one of MLD students, one of the last batch students, Dr. Nimish, to address us on a very interesting topic. And this topic actually evolved in a very interesting way as well. Actually, Dr. Nimish was due to present this presentation at our ICR month, which will be following from the ICR day. And as we looked at what his experience was, because he had presented this in another meeting, mainly with the interns. And as we went through his interesting case experiences, as well as the type of thinking that went into the formulation of his presentation, we were struck by the fact that though we mention that keynotes are what Alan has described or what the textbooks say, what we discovered was that keynotes is a method which all clinicians, whether they are conscious of it or not, utilize. And so therefore, keynotes are not something that are given, they don't fall from the skies. They are created in a very patient way. And there is a method in the manner in which keynotes get established. So as we went into the various experiences which Nimish was recounting, and actually speaking, we have had to restrict Nimish because otherwise Nimish would have taken the whole day talking about the interesting experiences that he has been through. But when we went on, right from the time that he was a student with MLD, right up to the time when he has been treating COVID cases. So it's a vast experience of more than, I think, 25 years. And how he as a clinician also has evolved, and from where, how these keynotes get established. So the interesting 4 questions, the what, the when, where, and the how, those came up in the process. Now, yesterday, when I visited Girgam, I carried out a very random search in order to find out how do clinicians make decisions in their clinical practice. And since we are dealing with 2 ACE clinicians, I went to the cupboard where LDD's records have been kept. And I discovered this one. It was absolutely a random search. The first book that came in my hand when I opened the cupboard, and the first page that came on, and that was in 1933. Now, 1933 was shortly after the HPGA was started. And you can see that this clinician has referred this case to LDD sir. And it's a very interesting way. He has said that this case has been directed to me by somebody. I am directing it to you because these chronic patients need expert homeopathic treatment. So please do the needful. So it was a little different culture at that time, and LDD had established himself very well as a ACE homeopathic clinician. This is the case record that he was maintaining. You may not be aware that there was also a clinical laboratory that he had started in our Sexaria building premises. So this was the letterhead of the clinical laboratory. And you can see the manner in which he has recorded the case, the manner in which his preliminary data is recorded, the chronic complaint for which the patient has come, and the elaborate way in which he has gone about giving a full description of what he has found in the case. It's a very interesting thing. It is really worthwhile. All of our aspiring PhD students will find it extremely useful to understand how clinicians at that time function. Now, this is the first page. Look at the second page. Obviously, this was in an era where he did not even have the repertorization form which we used when we were students. And laboriously, he has gone about doing the repertorization in a very, very systematic way. And he has then gone on, and even in the follow-up, you'll see, the case was recorded much earlier. In the follow-up also, you will see that the follow-up comprises of the clinical symptoms which have been repertorized and which he has proceeded with. So this is what I discovered in 1933. Let us go ahead to 1947. This was the second record. It was a big register, which MLD sir also continued to use. And you will find that over the last 14 years, LDD sir has changed his method of recording. His mind has got structured in a little different way. And you will find, now this was, if anybody of you old timers will remember, Gulzaridlal Nanda was the Home Minister of India in 1965-66. And this was somebody who was related to him. And you will find very, very interestingly, look at this, attraction towards opposite sex at the age of 6. See the in-depth way in which LDD has gone about, and you will find a detailed chronological sequence of the manner in which he has recorded all the instances right from the time of 1919 when the patient was born till the time that the patient has reported, 1946. And to be more astonishing, you will find that here again you find that there's such a detailed personal investigation, sexual experiences 42 to 946, sex worry. And it means that this clinician has spent a huge amount of time with this patient. And interestingly, again, you will find that now the repertorization has been discontinued. And you are able to see the clinician going straight into the treatment, into the remedies, and carrying on the treatment. So one finds that LDD as a clinician from 33 to 47, he evolved in a particular way, both in his case taking, in his case recording, and in his case processing. And if we now jump to MLD, this was 1970. Again, this was absolutely random selection of the register. And now you will find MLD's, and I must apologize to Nimish because I am anticipating what he is going to present. But what he is going to present is probably from 84, 85. And all participants will realize that in 1970, that is full 15, 16 years before Nimish's experience, MLD was absolutely the same. You can just find out the essence of what he has discovered. And mind you, this is also in depth. You have looked at the whiskey which has gone from half bottle to 4 pegs. You have gone smoker from 30 to 8. You have got a history of gonorrhea. You have got, and then here you have got the absolute essence of the case. And you can go to lycopodium. This was a case which he had recorded on a visit. So you will realize that as clinicians, both are similar. They are similar in their systematic approach, in their meticulous way in which they take cases, their exploration of the case in depth and with patience. And they are all rule-based. But we will realize that both differ in their willingness to conceptualize and act on these abstractions. And one would explore now with when Dr. Nimish presents his experiences, that how different at different times we as clinicians evolve, and how we are also conceptualizing, how we are also abstracting, how we are also concluding. The basic difference lies in what we have discovered right in the beginning, how systematic, how meticulous, how rule-based, and how in-depth exploration we have carried out, so that our conceptualization and abstractions retain the accuracy with which we would like to practice. So with these remarks, I will hand over the screen to Nimish. Kindly, Nimish, proceed with your presentation.
Thank you very much, sir, for the kind words. And I express my gratitude to the way I got such a supported learning at ICR right from the time I was with Sir Dr. Emil, sir. And I must express that today's presentation is vastly different from what I made 2 months back for several other groups and students and interns. Thanks to guiding light of Kumar sir, and for helping me to illuminate more windows inside me somewhere and helping me to come to some conceptualization. I have disappointed him about the length of the presentation and the slides to some extent, even though Dr. Bipin helped me a lot with respect to translating sir's guidance into action plans. So thank you, Dr. Kumar sir, thank you, Bipin, and thank you everybody who has been part of this journey, along with so much of technical support from Dr. Kev, and of course my clinic partners, my wife Mehta and Dr. Sonali has suffered a lot, great deal of discomfort in the process, as well as my department colleagues at the CMP college. So thank you everybody. I would like to start with the presentation. So, with our salutations, let me express this small idea of mine, that whenever we have presented anything at the ICR, this is especially for people who are guests to today's session and who are not so used to the ICR sessions. We don't make presentations to just share, or we are not into the teaching mode actually. We are into a mode of learning. And right from the time Sir founded this institute, everybody tries to share with that spirit that we are going to learn in the process, the speaker as well as the audience. So with that, let me start sharing my journey. It started very first time when I was in the first month of my training in 1985 with Sir Dr. Emil. I was with a supervisor, which is a standard system in the ICR setup. And I was a junior physician who was taking the case. Actually, I fumbled somewhere while talking to the patient, and the senior physician took over at that time. As you can see in the slide, male, 45 years old, he was a caterer. He had come for a 2-month-old non-improving diabetic ulcer. Along with that, he also had a varicosity. The pain wasn't the main phenomenon. The problem was non-healing part. Whatever pain he had was better to mark with cold fermentation. And the site had a very unhealthy granulation. So in whatever patchy case taking we could make, because he was in pain and he had fevers and all that problem going on, was that he had salivation in the sleep last 2 months. He has become a little more irritable with all these troubles. And with the fever, he was almost on the slightly chilly side. He talked intermittently, very egoistically about that he's a big reputation person, and his catering is also very different kind. He wanted something very big and different. So he was from a typical Maharashtrian area, where he said other caterers were rather famous, working towards giving a low-cost, economical packages, whereas he was the person who changed the whole scene with very high-end, very costly dishes. In 1985, he said, I don't do a catering without some 350 rupees per dish, something of that kind. He also had loud letters which we gathered. Now with this, me and my senior, we plan to start the treatment with an acute drug which you could see, whereas the chronic we could see some glimpses, but we were not sure because he was not very much, appearing to be happy for a detailed case taking. So we went with this plan. We were at Chembur and Sir was available for advice. Sir saw the case. I'm describing you exactly what happened. Okay, it was just a matter of 2-3 minutes. We looked at the case record, the paper case record standardized SCR in which we had entered the record. He didn't ask us a single question. He did not ask the patient also a single question. He just wrote this much that we were eagerly watching. As you can see on the screen, aristocratic vision with ambition, ulcers better by cold application, loud freightus, salivation, sleep duty, and he added his observation, early senility with graying and balding. Described the according 200, and the case was a history which we are remembering in 2021. So I was immediately struck by all these things that happened. I first thought whether it is some intuition or some masterly vision, which people have been talking about. I was reading Sir's book, I attended his lecture series, but this was still much more than all that in just span of a few minutes. The senior tried to help me. He said, this is keynote prescribed. I said, which book has such nice keynotes? And what I was actually fascinated by and what was I was in awe about was about, can homeopathic prescribing be so fast and perfect? I was thinking the whole case thing is incomplete. I had my own questions as a young person about what we'll do in next time and how will you manage this and how to call him for the testing and all that. And look here, it's like, just magic. So where are these kind of keynotes? What are these keynotes? Who has made this keynote? This is something much more than Allen's keynotes that I've seen in my college days. Okay, I was introduced by the time to synoptic key of Boger a little more than what I had read it in my college days. And I saw a synoptic key of Boger lying on the desk always with that lot of extra, points added by Sir. But still, so the objective of today's session is the same, with which I am sharing this whole experience in the whole journey. Where are these keynotes? Where are they in the case? And when do we apply? Can we apply it in every case? So there are some specific typical cases where you can apply. And how to study these things. We all remember, friends, that our eyes see what our mind knows. So fasten your seatbelts. Some cases, sometimes I have been I've gone about flying into my fascination and some attraction and, something which just grips me. Sometimes I've been trying to walk on the ground forcefully, trying to remain grounded with facts and data and books and literature. So let's all go through a little learning and probably also a little unlearning and try to grasp this concept. So if you see definition-wise what we learned in the college days, the originator of Keynote was Gunsey and it was so developed by Allen. And as every book, including Dr. Tavle's book on principle and practice mentions. So these are characteristics which point unmistakably to a small group of remedies. Friends, you remember there are so many keynotes, musics that we all know. We all, years back, the radio is now no more Akashwani or TV is no more Doordarshan. But those tunes, even if we hear the 10 seconds of the tune, we can remember that music. Keynotes are that, like what music a master of an orchestra plays, and the whole orchestra knows what is the next song to be played. And I remember one of our teacher, Dr. Samant, used to say this, mnemonic. Keynotes are like kings, eliminating symptoms and emperors. And of course, Dr. Samad also used to say, Bachalo, this is the Royal Road. That is what is written by Dr. Tawde in his main book. Royal roads are meant for royal people. Okay, so don't venture into this until you really have good enough knowledge and good enough control. Now, Dr. Sawant was somebody who remembered Allen's keynote word by word, page by page. If he said, don't do this much, it's not easy, it's very difficult, try to achieve it, it looked very, very difficult at the time. Okay. So keynotes, as Sir pointed out, are not just in Allen's book. Keynotes somewhere evolve within a person's mind through experience, through readings, through everything that he does as a physician. And we all can help each other as physicians in this process. Yeah. Keynotes, I feel, is like an awareness. It's almost like a kind of process which generates within us and it guides us further. So one of the initial phase of my career at after finishing my primary orientation at ICR was at the college where there were a lot of fever cases when I just entered the college as a honorary in the hospital. And I remember so many struggle days. We had a long symposium on fever where Dr. Kothari from Baroda had come and Dixit sir had also presented fever cases. I presented some enthusiastic presentation where, you laugh at me now, but I had a case of typhoid, which we thought we cured in 21 days, though it was such a difficult case. And we took a long, long session on that. And you know what it turned out with a long, long session taught us of what all things we have not done so well, because of which the case went up to 21 days. 21 days is self-limiting duration of typhoid. But it looked a very difficult struggle when we were treating those cases. Those are the era of, there was a Dombivli fever epidemic where there were a lot of cases. And I remember I talked with Kothari sir on phone for long, trying to study his cases, which we were preparing for a journal, which I was doing with Baralia sir. And then I remember I went to Dixit sir's clinic on Sunday mornings to see the fever cases along with him. To make the whole story short, it was like we moved from a very classical case taking of no leading question at all to a case taking where there were a lot of questions which were asked by us, though taking care that they are not leading it direct, a lot of questions. And we tried to explore each and every aspect of the case. But what intrigued me was what I'm trying to share here in this case. Now, this is actually a recent case, but it's good to demonstrate what I went through and what I settled for. So I received a call. This was just recently, and it represents very nicely what I've been trying to do when I completely sharing this case. The daughter-in-law called because the patient was not very comfortable talking. And on the phone, she said the patient has fever, she's got a body ache, she has a headache, and is feeling weak. And she cannot come to the clinic. And she cannot talk on the phone as well. Now, this family is known to us. The patient is known to us. The patient was treated with a chronic remedy, palladium, for her osteoarthritis and other complaints. But right now, this is very unusual that she said that she cannot come on the phone or she cannot talk. And these are the complaints, and please give the medicine. Now, with the background, it's a long case taking, I was also internally somewhere feeling upset on and off because I was also teaching organon in the college, and there were aphorisms. And the aphorisms mention about this. The aphorism mention about a quicker case taking in acute. The aphorism mentioned that when there is an acute disease, mark these words of the organon text, not more spun out and verbose, but more significant. And the focus would be on the general symptoms, okay, but precisely defined as to their specialities, such spatial points, So these are the words which caught my mind at that time. Some few more words in this aphorism sequence. On the other hand, the spatial symptoms, which are peculiar to but few diseases and of rare occurrence, at least in the same combination. So these are wordings which we went on reverberating in my mind very often whenever I was teaching. And they used to echo in my mind when I was doing those acute case things also. So our first level of learning was trying to move from a very so-called classical case taking, as I understood, to a more comprehensive case taking for prescribing very well in those acute cases and fever cases. We, of course, went to a stage under Dr. Divsit's guidance where we were able to treat and get results in typhoid cases within 2-3 days. And you'll see in some of the cases that we are presenting today, that what is the speed at which some of these results take place with that approach. But I was also studying, every time that I would open the repertory for concomitants in Boger Bonnicasson's repertory section, I would always keep searching in the journal cases, and I was reading many of the old journal cases also. And I used to repertorize cases which are given in literature, like Boger's literature. And one of my most favorite book at the time was Boger's Studies in Philosophy of Healing. And one of the best chapters in that is the negative disease. So I went through these things, and let me tell you now what I did after this phone call. So this, when the patient tells such symptoms, these are symptoms told by almost every case: fever, body ache, weakness, headache, bad taste. These are almost like, bangle pieces for us. Okay. Bangle pieces don't give a design, so it doesn't give us a pattern. So this detailed case taking, I tried to convert into small questionnaire. I tried to frame questions out of the most frequently seen areas where we saw characteristics and the most frequent rubrics which helped in forming totality, and the most frequent differentiation grounds which we saw with these kind of cases. Mind you, I'm right now talking only about acute cases, that means acute disease cases, typically like dengue, typhoid and all. Or I'm talking about chronic cases with a lot of recent, characteristics like malaria, or sometimes chronic arthritis cases or asthma cases with exacerbations, where there were plenty of recent deviations. These are all the cases which are in my mind when I'm talking about this focused skilled inquiry. When the patient was not very cooperative to really have a complete case-taking experience and communication, I use some of them to complete my database and my understanding of the case and my understanding of the data. So these are examples of cases, questions that I asked. This is not the list of all the questions because it will take away a lot of our time. But just if I talk about one question, what are the complaints about your eyes? Because I found in so many of the cases of fever, especially, that the before, during, and after eye symptoms with respect to chill and fever made my prescription so clear, so easily, so many times. Okay. Even a simple thing like most of the patients of fever say about taste alteration, in the fever phase. But going a little more in detail, just a little more. This is a very favorite phrase that I've been sharing with my students also. Just a little more to make it something which is individualized. You ask taste for food, you ask taste for water, and a small Pandora's box opens up with some fantastic characteristics for you, and which are definitely clues. So same way about sleep, the same way about how do you feel emotionally now. There are people who are fed up with an illness. There are people who feel an illness is harassing them, like the typical animal kingdom reactions. There are people who talk about sleepiness with the acute. People talk about sleeplessness with the acute and variations of all that. So if you just give these are like clues to the person, small clues, but which opens up the person's memory and mind towards sharing with you. And when you just take this with a time sequence, this is what I got. A simple body ache turned into a leg pain fever before, headache fever before. So I got nice prodromal symptoms, and you can see these are very easy to see as keynotes. We found that before the fever started, she had a lot of fullness in the abdomen and discomfort about that. Okay. With the fever, there was weakness and body ache. The bad taste wasn't sure what it was about, but she was definitely sleepless during fever, thirstless during fever, and she was just sitting. She was feeling nice with, just sitting, and she was feeling nice with. Yeah. And she wanted a lot of fanning, and she had perspiration in the head and neck. Friends, these bangle pieces are turned into kaleidoscope design. This is something which is going to take me quicker and better and stronger and more sure what I have to prescribe. So, as you can see, the upper one, preparation, is about keynotes. Yes, it's telling you about we have come, from the whole gamut of remedies in Medica. With these 3 keynotes, we are coming to 3 drugs as very, very serious consideration: carbovage, arsenic, and dust drugs. And the other ones quite less in the background. And there's no palladium in sight at all. So I'm ruling out any possibility of chronic coming in required to be prescribed in this acute phase. And I'm also getting a clue to what are the likely acute drugs. When I apply all the characteristics, as you can see in the lower part of the slide, with the full representation, I'm able to still see the same 3 drugs supported and covering most of the characteristics with a little edge for the cartilage. Yeah. Now, this little edge, how do we cross-check whether it is guiding us for the decision making or not? So that is where one of the first things you should check is always check and focus on the correct rubrics. A little here and there, if your rubrics are not correct, you might make a very gross error at this stage and you might be derailed into a wrong path. So after checking that, I also checked with the elimination by key. This is what is the core theme of what I'm trying to present today. If you use a group of keynotes as eliminating, even though you might not be using a keynote approach only for prescribing, you might be using other approaches out of the various approaches that we have for method of forming totality. It can be repertorial, Kent, Boger, Woningen, it can be non-repertorial in terms of portrait. But everywhere, if you keep this focus in your mind, that you do see elimination by the keynotes, you definitely come to more focused vision of what drugs are really seriously there to be considered, and you reach to this group very fast and in a very sure way. So friends, then I tried to correlate that the patient was hardly talking, which was unusual for her. Okay, so you're somebody who liked appreciation and talking. He was completely reversed. She has become very dull as compared to usual. In terms of that mental frame, it is not dullness as a symptom. It is overall dull outlook with which the communication is restricted, and she's trying to communicate through the doctor. And even to my questions, which I showed you an example for, even those questions were basically asked by Dr. Indo in some way or the other, or observed by Dr. Indo and GP. I thought this is more of a, relatively, when I think of these 3 drugs, when I'm going to these 3 drugs, and then when I'm looking at this reaction, it takes me to carbon group definitely, and carbovage definitely, as compared to arsenic carbon drugs. So we gave carbovage 30 BD to this patient with all the relevant advice about vitamins and rest and the investigations and everything. I'm skipping that part because we have limited time and we want to focus on the theme of today's presentation. So some details I'm not adding, which we generally otherwise never miss in an ICR presentation. So the patient was normal. She was normal in all the symptoms even before we got the results of the investigation that she is a COVID positive case. She was, as you can see, a very mild case of COVID, but it was quite quick and instantaneous that the whole result occurred. Now, this is the method that I'm talking about when I'm talking about the keynotes as a very, very able weapon. It's not just a Ellen's keynote. It's not just one of the approach of method forming totality. It's a weapon, it's a method, it's a process through which a lot of windows opens up inside us. Yes, and in our solving of cases. So for me, keynotes have maximum come up easily when I saw the evolution of disease. Never miss any sequence when you are taking case of anything of this kind. Don't miss anything. Nothing is stupid. Event 1, event 2, event 3. The sequence must be noted even with the most non-cooperative, most non-communicative patient. Okay, and go to search, like in a fever case, you go to search for prodrome change, heat, fever, hyperexia. Anyhow, just the reflection of these stages will tell you a lot. See, for example, body ache and fever are 2 very, very common symptoms with so many of the acute diseases. But pain extremities before fever would be one particular specific group of drugs. It's a very powerful fever. And if that pain would be more localized part, it will be further more clear, further more characteristic, further more keynote. So just a simple exploration of modality, concomitant, sensation, location in that order, and an exploration of event 1, event 2, event 3, and overall appreciation of what happening to the mind, what's happening to the body, what are the deviation. So friends, keynotes are not just Ellen's keynotes. You get some superb observational characteristics like, the examples on the screen. Person says that I got a sore throat first and the coryza is very sure it's a definite direction upwards, which adds to your immediate totality. Right ankle, then it goes to right knee, it's an ascending direction. Patient talks about fever with tonsils and you don't find any symptom of pain. Patient talks about hoarseness and there's no pain. So the painlessness becomes a negative symptom. And again, this is how you are able to treasure on to keynotes in a very, very easy way by focusing on not missing any of the evolutionary details. So this was one phase of what I learned about keynotes and what way I started using them very actively. And I think this has helped me a lot in solving a lot of my COVID cases, post-COVID cases, even cases of COVID in the ICU and all, as we'll go ahead with the journey. But there's one more pattern of cases where actually keynotes are helping. This is exactly, I would like to represent these kind of cases. There are so many of cases where we get there's no scanty data. There's rather a sea of data. It's like you get lost. So much of data. I would like to share a typical case of such a data kind of picture. This was a case of extrinsic allergic alveolitis. The diagnosis was reached after not reaching a diagnosis for 4.5 months at one of the hospitals where the patient was. And he came over to see me after a lot of struggle that he had with the illness. This patient originally I had met for osteoarthritis of the knee. And at the time when he came to me, he came in a very acute pain, limping. The acute picture was very clear, as you can see, for magnesium phos. He was in really very bad pain, and this picture was very, instantaneously elicited, and it was going on for the previous 2 to 3 days. So we gave Magphos, and he responded very well to Magphos, 4-hourly in 200 potency. And once he became a little better, in 3 days, we got some more investigation done. And when we met for the chronic case taking, he was an ex-army man with a lot of attachment for the family and a lot of anxiety. And we'll not go into these details right now, but Kalita came up very prominently and it gave us a very good result with 200 weekly doses. I think for a few days we had given daily doses and again went back to weekly doses and then on the placebo. So at the end of 2 months, we could send him as report SOS or to come again. Only when there's an observation with the guidance about exercises and calcium and vitamin D and all those things. After 2 years, I saw him when he came after that long hospitalization and also a few more days of struggle with allopathy medicines. He was extremely anxious. He was talking about the course of illness and what happened. He was non-stop for quite some time that I had to listen to him. He went on, open the large file that he was carrying with him and turning pages and showing me different reports and how things were uncertain, how, he was in a bad crisis, how much money he has spent, what kind of medicines he received, and all of it as if, how bad I've suffered. And he also went through some severe untoward reaction to treatment according to him, because of which he's been suffering from breathlessness and whatnot. So I then sat down for what I thought was the most important thing required in the culture. So we got this story. He had opened a new office, and the new office, this has happened, for 3 months, yeah. So the insecticide spray was done in the office on the day previous to the inauguration, okay, as a part of pest control of the whole place. And so Yes, Dr. Kev? Okay, sure. Thank you. So in mid-April 92, this is a case that occurred. A day previous to the inauguration, there was an insecticide spray in the office. And the chair had a velvet material which he suspects had some residual pesticide. So he just sat on the chair for a few minutes and he developed, next morning he developed these local dermatitis. It was first itching and rash on all these areas, support, neck and other areas. And within few hours, he started having a lot of vomiting. And then very soon he started got these lymph nodes in different parts and pain. One by one, the lymph node were increasing next day onwards. It was very, very confusing for his family doctor. It was very confusing for him what's happening. He was on receiving some symptomatic treatment. And it went on to became into a, lead to cough and then joint pains. And then it started having fevers. Now there's something very typical about this fever, that there were chills in the fever. And the chills began, he showed with the back of his hand, touching his upper back between the scapula. And it ran up the nape of the neck with dizziness. He was feeling a little dizzy with that. So the weakness increased very badly every time the fever increased. And there were spells of this fever which were coming. The temperature increased in sudden spells during the exacerbation. So there were like episodes of all these things happening now, right from the time 3 months back that this problem occurred. And it will have a quick rise and equally quick drop, 104 to normal, this kind of fever. It was all very, very foxing according to treating doctors. And now every few days the fever was going up to 101. Okay. Initially the fever came after a long gap of 30 days. Then very often. The last episode is 4 days back, and he just recovered from everything 2 days back. And there's so much of weakness after all the episode, which is mounting now. And his body becomes cold, very cold, icy cold, hands and feet after the fever. His toes goes into a lot of cramp. Along with this, he described something which just caught my attention. He talked that my discharges, normal discharges have become so foul. The whole room stinks, Okay. He said that even if I'm sleeping in a room with the AC, my perspiration makes the room smell so bad that somebody entering the room could have a nausea. Even when he goes to the washroom, which is attached to his bedroom, people cannot be in the bedroom also. It is so smelly. It is extremely foul odor. And this is with the perspiration also. He has to change his clothes very often because of that. He finds even his urine has turned so much offensive. It's not just this. Even when he sneezes, this little spray of discharge makes the whole room smell very bad. Now, I've never heard about such a symptom ever earlier. In terms of just such a bad smell. A sneezing leads to some foul smell in the room, that much foul discharges. So this definitely caught my attention. So I went over the remaining other aspects of the case also, which happened about that everything is just over 2 days back, and he's anxious that it will happen again. And he's lost 4 kg weight. His knee pain also recurred along with this. And he's basically a chilly person, but during fever also, he's a little more chilly. He's now constipated all the time. He's got a lot of mouth ulcers because of various medicines that he's taking. So he wants to take cold food to relieve all this thing. He really desires, but he cannot take them because of the whole complaint being respiratory with cough and breathlessness, bronchospasm. Now, this is a sea of data. I was really, we say that we should remain unprejudiced during case taking. I think it's something natural in human that it happens to all of us that when you're listening to patient. Something does move in our mind. On one side, I was getting a lot of that Kalikab experience again and again. because the way he was expressing and sharing the whole thing. And a lot of symptoms also being covered by Kalika. On the other hand, I was able to see a sea of data, and there were some characteristics. Now, I teach symptomatology, and this thing always, echo whenever I'm selecting characteristics. I emphasize, overemphasize, repeat about these 4 criteria and about applying the evaluation order. So this is what happened to me. On one side, I was able to see Kalika from this sea of data and so many things matching with Kalika. Okay. On the other side, I was able to see something which struck, okay, about these 2 characteristics. Okay. Because if you look at from the top, like a falcon flies over a sea, you can definitely see these 2 symptoms sparkling bright, really sparkling bright. So if you see the repetition of just these 2 keywords, you can see pyrogen very well. And you do not see Kalika anywhere in the one symptom coverage. But if I would have gone to a standard reparation, taking all the characteristics, I may not see pyrogen so easily, because a lot of other symptoms are not in the repertory as symptoms of pyrogen so easily. Pyrogen is one of the less listed drugs. In fact, all the nosodes are still, even today, even with the most updated softwares, a lot of symptoms which you'll find in Allen's nosodes and in Julian's book, in nosodes and sarcodes, are not with the repertory. So this view is very important that you make of these keynotes, and you have a window to look at what is coming through these characteristics. You will need to then read from Matra Medica. Okay. So this is where Boger's words really help you to be sure of what you're doing. Boger writes in Philosophy of Healing that the distressing symptoms appearing during the course of chronic disease often demand particular attention. The counterpart will often correspond to the rest of the symptoms. Please emphasize that in the distressing symptoms appearing during the course, means the recent symptoms, they will definitely help you. And if you see a drug through that, it will cover all the remaining other characteristics, all the other aspects of the case very well. And I checked through sources, I found pyrogen bleaching, which is a lot of symptoms which you all can also do. Okay, we discussed this case in the symposium long back, and this was an intermittent kind of a chronic disease. So we had to wait for the decline of the paroxysm. That's what I guided him to do. That when you're very sure that there's a paroxysm, it's over. So that happened after 2 days. So he took the medicine, and in the next 2 days, he could manage without any allopathic medicine. He didn't require any bronchodilator inhaler. He didn't require any fever medications. He had no other symptomatic relief required. The pain, weakness, everything was better on 31st when he called me up, and the next day when I took the follow-up. No fever, less chilly. He was anticipating everything to repeat again in 4 days or 7 days, which did not happen. So I waited for some time. All through, after the dose of pyrogen, no symptoms of the whole cycle of illness, which was going on for more than 3 months. And which was quite foxy and perplexing. So we remained on SL for some time, watching me over, and I waited almost for a month. Okay. And I often wait for chronic symptoms to come up after such a prescription of a phase. Okay. This is not an acute prescription. Pyrogen in this case, there is acute distress, but it's an exacerbation of a chronic disease. So pyrogen is a chronic phase remedy, which is meant to solve the current phase of the chronic disease. So obviously, if you require the next medicine as your basic constitutional medicine, you have to wait for those symptoms to come back. And exactly that's what happens in most of the cases. There is always some clue. The clue might sometimes be just a thermal state shift. The clue might be a dream coming back. The clue might be a craving coming up strongly, enhancing again. And the clue can be return of some of the chronic complaints. So he came back in November with his backache symptoms. And at the time, again, Kalika picture was seen. He gave that. And as you can see in the follow-up, there is few follow-ups now from 92 till now. Okay, for some seasonal complaint, for some knee complaints. And most of the time, he has done well throughout this phase as with Kalika. And the symptom which we solved with pyrogen never came back. It has not come back to date. So, friends, we all treat cases and we all have successes, but some successes are so profound, so powerful that they make some lessons across. So the lesson about recent symptoms and the lesson about what we have to give priority to the sparkling characteristic is absolutely clear here. And this kind of cases have had a big dent in the way I look at characteristics, the way I look at keynotes, and the way I look at totality. Let's see in one more case of dengue that I happened to treat with my colleague, Dr. Jayesh Digreja, with my Agaran department. This is way back in 2010 when there was a dengue epidemic. We had this case which I saw at the end of day 2 at the hospital. The patient had come for 3 days of fever and then he was admitted. On the day 1 with dengue, his platelet was 89,000. Day 2, it was 7,000. And I was closer to the hospital at the time, so I went across to see at night. And this was really panicky after we got this report that his WBC count is dropping and his platelet has become 7,000. There was force by, kind of indirect pressure from the other ONP coming on the floor, and allopathic that you cannot be treating such a patient in a ward. So what I saw, I went to the hospital notes of the case taking done by the previous physician. Fever since 2 days, body was warm, there were no chills. The no chills was mentioned because the fever was a paroxysmal fever. That was called, noted by the doctor treating also. Headache during fever, bitter taste in the mouth. This is the way the notes went about. The whole case taking was done. I'll go to the totality which was being practiced. Sulfur was given with this totality by the treating doctor at the time. So my attention went to where I would look up. I would be able to make a change to the scene because obviously sulfur has not worked and the case is right now in a critical crisis. So I looked at these symptoms and I tried to apply my focused case, questioning for the acute cases of this kind. We went through clinically, just cross-checking that everything is just dengue, most likely, and nothing else. Malaria was ruled out, urine infection was ruled out, and all that. And clinically, how stable the patient is. And then a review case taking where just the same, focused inquiry led me to pick up the onset, which was very sudden. Okay, for the first 2 days, the fever suddenly and would shut up before any treatment is given. It's very important to note what happens to the fever before any treatment is given, because even a paracetamol taken changes the fever picture very often. Yeah, the fever was paroxysmal fever even when no medicine was taken. And then it turned into, and there was no chill whatsoever in all these episodes. The bitter taste I explored a little more, and I found that the bitter taste was for everything, but the water tasted not. And every time that the fever cycle would start, there was a headache. I could note this in my, that just little more over those symptoms which were already seen by the previous case. I tried to again overview and found little more data about that he was feeling very sleepy during the fever. He had weakness from day 1, which is important not only as a characteristic, but it's also important from the angle of miasms. And he had joint pains, but there are some joint pains which are chronically going on, which in my evaluation were more like vitamin D3 deficiency or maybe a fibromyalgia. But these were definitely not worse with the fever right now. He also had a little red strawberry tongue, loss of food, thirst was over increased, quite increased with fever, dryness of throat, red color urine, possibly related to low platelets, a small hemorrhagic reaction which has started, that means, and palms warm to touch. A basically hot patient, but now he's chilly with acute fever. This was one major change. And I found him overall to be a very mild person, doesn't get much angry. This I confirmed with him also. he was reasonably cooperative because he's a very adjustable person. So even with the fever and little of the anxiety about the 7,000 count, he was reasonably calm. He was appeared to be very timid. The calmness probably also was connected to that he was very timid. And he's not somebody who shares his feeling very easily. He keeps getting dreams of his family members and friends. He had come to Mumbai for meeting some recruitment agent actually. He was from West Bengal. So he was very certain that he wants to take homeopathy medicine only. That was one plus point for us. Even with that 7,000 platelet, he never asked me or any of us that whether we should go for allopathy or any other medication or any other approaches. So the priorities in this acute totality, obviously, first, most important PQRS symptoms, bitter taste except water. Very, very powerful treatment. Followed by headache before fever and fever, paroxysmal pattern, not having chills. And then we also have this other data about acute sudden onset, thirst increase, hot patient turning chilly, vertigo, sleepy. So these are the keynotes, as I repeat, and I look for the repetition with keynotes first. So there, what is very noticeable, no single drug is covering all the 3 keynotes, but there are 2 drugs from the same family out of the top 5 drugs. Okay. And so I had to mentally compare what are these other drugs. You see Brian and Rustox, but you see Aconite and Pulsatilla in the same family. This is something important for me, as I learned while studying cases, studying literature with Dr. Shankaran, that the fun family seems very prominent in the presentation. It's worth giving a second thought to. And I also tried to look up to there are a lot of ranunculus family features, the family of Pulsatilla and the family of Aconite as well. So next logical thing was to put a family filter and see. So as a family, all the 3 characteristics are covered. And the more PQRS out of the 3, the most PQRS rather, about the taste was covered with Aconite. So there is a keynote entry, taste bitter except water, head pain feel before, and chill absent. And a typical picture of suddenness with an overall Pulsatilla-like constitution, which is like a ranunculaceae family, overall constitution. So Aconite from the family of ranunculaceae, 200 wonders. This is how I went about, and you can see the difference. The 7,000 after Aconite wonders of 200 turned 23,000. But we had a little low on the next day. If you see WBC is consistently improving, but he had little hemorrhagic reaction on that day again, and count again dropping. So as I had noted that the case is extremely tubercular bias, I interpolated a dose of tuberculinum. You can see the response to tuberculinum also. One of the things which it all did not just jump the platelet. Tuberculinum also opened up his symptoms a little more. We were wondering at the time when we gave Aconite, the patient is so quiet. But on this day after tuberculinum, we saw that Aconite state. A lot of anxiety and panic with, the symptoms turning, the values turning 9,000 again previous day. So after that, we gave Aconite same potency second dose. And you can see the difference of Aconite action before and after tuberculinum. You can see result of the case before and after Aconite. And it's not clear that everything moves so well. Yeah. So patient had a smooth recovery after this. So this is about a keynote and a plan together. So keynote opens up your mind towards possibilities. And when you apply your remaining homeopathic knowledge from different approaches, the pathway really opens up very easily and very well. So very important thing that you learn from such cases is that what you have to see in the case taking is that whether this case is going to require the chronic remedy or the acute remedy. My decision about Aconite was supported by the fact that he had, in the recent symptoms, very strong deviations in the acute fever picture itself. Dengue being an acute disease supported that we were to go towards an acute prescription, but we had to confirm that the chronic constitution is not right now expressing. It's more of the deviation which is expressing. So I'll give you a few examples. There are cases, for example, burning in eyes with fever. So burning in eyes and lacrimation happened in the case which was never a part of the chronic picture ever. Could be needing some acute remedy. But the same burning in the eyes seen first time in a lycopodium constitution. And if the patient is going through a concomitant state which also looks like lycopodium of that worries and anxiety, then you have to consider lycopodium itself even during that. So these are some crucial deviations to notice. What's happening to the overall manifestation picture with the illness. The language of disease, as Boger says. Boger says small things, if you give attention to, they tell you what is to be done in the case. So even a small single characteristic, what is the meaning of that characteristic? When you look at characteristic, don't just look at for picking up whether they are keynotes or not. We have to look at it from all the angles of symptomatology. One of the important angles is whether that symptom is telling us to go towards forming an acute totality or we have to go towards forming a chronic totality. Now, this is very, very important, and that clarity can mean a lot in terms of what will happen in the result, and confusion at that level can lead to a lot of problems, which we'll share in a short while. So keynotes can give you false confidence. Let me tell you at this chapter. This case of pyrogen, dengue, and 7,000 platelet, and it can give us a wrong confidence about what keynotes can do as a magic also. Keynotes do not teach us to go into short case taking. Keynotes do not teach us to work with incomplete data. It does give you a speed of functioning, but don't allow the speed of functioning to take you over. Don't go overboard. There is always a need for telling of coordinates of any totality picture. What I mean by coordinates is that every totality would have completeness and a balance of its own, which you will get when you use some Mathematica reference to conform. So always do conform with your working knowledge of Mathematica or refer some source books to conform. Okay. So otherwise, this can be, I saw two characteristics and I prescribed. It can, if you remain in the same awe and fascination of what I had in my 1985 after looking at source prescription. But maybe some element of that remained in me. Yeah, I must admit, because this next case shows what happened. There was a case of COVID who was in the ICU in the hospital, and she was in Pune in a hospital, and her niece is a physiotherapist in Mumbai who is known to us. We worked very closely for many arthritis cases, so very well acquainted with this. She asked whether we can help this patient because she's worsening in the ICU, and there are some problems with which many patients over there are not doing well, and there was a panic in the voice. Diagnosis COVID pneumonia already, and she's in a government hospital. The patient had economic problems, the patient had logistic problems, there was nobody around to help us. The patient couldn't directly talk to us on the phone. She had messaged some few things to that niece of hers. A few answers are available in SMS. So friends, I am sharing this not as a great success case. I am sharing this as my caution case. A caution for, you gave me a big red alert in my life and a caution case for all of us while we are trying to learn more and more about keynotes. So how illusions about totality can cause difficulties, this was a very, very intense experience. This is a case which I treated along with my better half, Dr. Mehta, who was the primary physician. So on day one, this was a few days after, as you can see, the case was diagnosed. So we saw the case on day 13 of the illness, and the patient was around 40 years old. She had, this is what was described to the physiotherapist's niece, that she had a lot of acidity, she had a lot of fibromyalgia-like pain. She remembered the phone call because she asked her for some exercises for that pain. And that is how she came to know about her illness after a few days. Then she came to her, hear that there's a lot of fever and she's feeling very sleepy with that. And on the phone, video call. They probably had seen each other, and she was very eyes were full of tears. So she asked, and the patient said, no, she's not weeping. Right? So there was a lot of lacrimation with fever. So this is all the glimpses that niece remembered, the physiotherapist. And with our focus questionnaire, she could gather these from the family. But there was a lot of weakness, fever, almost before fever actually, and was weakness causing a lot of sleepiness, and the skin was feeling dry. She was complaining about salivation during sleep for recent symptoms, grinding during sleep. We thought we got a lot of data. She was, whenever she called the family initially when she was not at the ICU, she was always weeping to the family, and she was sounding very anxious. So I got this picture. Now we tried, but in the family there were two kids, 10 and 12 years old, who couldn't tell much, and the aspects of going on towards more data was not possible. We went ahead with those, some of the symptoms that we saw, and we gave pulsatilla 30 TDS. The pulsatilla appeared very clear and strong from these characteristics of extremities, fever, pain before, sleepiness before, weakness, leaving fevers, salivation, grinding teeth, and all, as you can see on the repetition. In 3 days, there was some improvement, but there were also palpitations and chest pain. The oxygen saturation was not improving so well. And we found that little more observations available, that she was a very active and positive person. She was trying to help even other people in the ward before she went to the ICU, is what was told by the family members. A very strong temperament, according to everybody. And she also SMS to us about, in a very enthusiastic way, that I feel I'm going to improve, and I'm at least having some improvement already now. I was feeling very depressed earlier. We also gathered one symptom in those attempts to get more data about water tasting sweet for 3 days. And so there was a small questionnaire that I tried to communicate with her on the messages, which gathered these characteristics, and which we went to, taste water, sweeties. I took it as an eliminating symptom with all the remaining keynotes, and so lycopodium appeared. So I said, okay, for pulsatilla, first phase has helped a little, but we are able to see that there's no more pulsatilla, and this is lycopodium, and she requires a chronic remedy because the patient had a prodromal acidity. So it is supportive of chronic totality, and went to lycopodium. We had a very slow improvement again. So we gave tuberculinum on 7th, after 1 day after lycopodium. We were not getting reports copies from that hospital. We just got this much from that the HRCT severity was 13/25 of the COVID pneumonia, and the RT-PCR value was this. And the patient is now on steroid. There was some delay about remdesivir and oxygen supply to the hospital. So there was a batch of patients who were bad in the ICU at that juncture. So all that was received at this time after lycopodium. So it was slightly better after lycopodium, and then all these things were received. But now there was no further improvement occurring, and so we talked to the family with that despair. But see, this is not improving, and we require really more details. And then we got some more data observations about her enthusiasm to life, very liveliness, somebody. And she also talked that even ICU, she tries to, cheer up people around with some face grimaces and some dance movements, because she doesn't like people remaining so dull and depressed around. So the family also echoed again that she's always been liking music and dance, and this is what tends to happen. So we gathered these new details, repertorized. Now, natriuretic was seen on the screen, but we thought acidity is there in the prodrome. So not typical natriuretic, we went to natrium phos. All our gray areas of past experience work at the wrong time. And they guide you in the wrong direction. Some equation in my mind after reading those synthetic prescriptions and various drug pictures from books like Shorten about natriuretic versus natrium phos, some of the case experiences, and also this aspect about dancing and all being so prominent phosphorus components, disappointment being such a phosphorus component. I went to natural phos. Again, there was a hiccup-like response, some improvement again. Mind you, the patient is somewhere doing better slowly, but it's too slow. So we then talked to Dr. Fansalkar sir from Pune, who has more extensive experience in treating COVID pneumonia. I was partly feeling that I was able to do something, though there was a struggle of data and struggle of the bad clinical situation and all the communication problem. On the other side, I look forward to some big change because I was really getting jittery and anxious about what was happening with the case. Sir said very clearly, give natriuretic 30 for early, and he said that oxygen requirement must come down fast. Every 24 hours, very big change. Otherwise, we have to be vigorous and forceful with the doses. So we went about with that policy. Still, some difficulties did come up on 21st. He developed oxygen saturation drop again, sleepiness again, and some drowsiness symptoms and some dizziness. Sir advised for bacteria, 200 initially, then 1M. Then he was very clear that you are just keep a watch for one hint that natrium is coming. So with that guideline, we just waited, and she soon talked us about the same acidity coming back. We went to natrium 200, then 1M, then 0 by 1. And she has been one of the fortunate patients. They reportedly, some 1/3 patients from that whole lot who had some difficulties about treatment and late steroid, late oxygen, late remdesivir, etc. It's not been analyzed very technically and scientifically, but 2/3 have saved, and a large majority, 1/3 have gone into some problem. She's one out of those 2/3 lucky patients who improved and not gone into fatal complications. So the lessons were very clear that keynotes cannot compensate for clear, deep history, especially when a chronic is indicated, not at all. And acute and so-called zigzag, not advisable when chronic is indicated from day one. So it's very crucial to pick up what we require at acute prescription or a chronic prescription. Otherwise, you will end up into a difficulty. And the acidity in exacerbation and the meaning of acidity, lessons learned. So Boger also, I went back to my book again while reading when I was trying to digest this experience. And it's written very clearly that the latest manifestation may not lead to complete curative prescriptions. Look for complementary real symptom. When you prescribe with recent symptoms, remember this is very, very important. And he said that totality is clear only when meaning of the whole vital disturbance is clear. So check your case taken from this angle. Histories must reflect the constitutional meaning. Remember those words? Even in Allen's keynote, he writes, pulsatilla for this kind of temperament, aconite for this kind of phase of disease. There are something which is happening to the constitution, something is happening in deviation, something is there in the underlying disposition. All these things are constitutional meanings in Boger's language. And our understanding of the whole vital disturbance is very important. Whether you do it fast, whether you do it slow, whether you do it with keynotes, whether you do it with the classical other approaches. You must have, in your perceiving, in your understanding of the case, the meaning of the whole vital disturbance. So the next case tells us that when we are going to do this, what happens? This is a case which I solved with my clinical associate, Dr. Sonali. And this was also approached by a family doctor. Luckily, she was a BHMS, so she could help us in a lot of details and gathering the totality. The patient was, we got the case on day 19 of the illness when he was at the ICU, partially recovered after all the combination of all the possible remedies under the protocol being given. And the family doctor was very anxious about something requires to be done for the case. So in the flashback, which we do for the acute deviations as well as all the physical data of the chronic state and mental data of the chronic state. We got all these details that the patient developed extreme weakness with desire to lie down at the first symptom. Okay, and this thing lasted for about 3-4 days before the fever, and then on 9th at 3 advice, exactly something like 7 days. In the family, there were already other patients suspected of COVID. The patient was facing that stress also. His own COVID test came positive on 9th. He had symptoms of nausea. He was feeling chilly, and like some juncture he wanted AC, but he had to avoid because of fever. Some juncture he had to avoid AC because the other patients in the ward did not like. And there was a drop of appetite, which again improved a little. The changes in the thirst, which is for the sips, and sleepless at night and sleep in the day. Now, this case had features of prominent deviations during acute. But something more as we go about tells us that the case is not requiring acute prescription. And that was this details that he was feeling extremely anxious. When he was put to, when he listened to his wife turning positive, he suddenly turned very anxious. And when the father was informed, about having the illness, he became very nervous. And with this, the whole illness escalated. The illness, which was looking mild and was also appearing to be partly improving, suddenly turned very bad, and he had a sudden oxygen drop. Okay, just immediately, very soon after, the wife and the father were admitted. It was like panic, which he is used to. This is what is his temperament, according to the family doctor was referring. So the sole young caretaker who is very responsible, very caring towards his duties, very jovial by nature, a very sharing person. Okay, but right now was showing symptoms a lot of panic. He has other aspects of irritability, he has aspects about optimism. So until people were in the hospital, when everything was mild, he was very, very fine, he was very hopeful everything will settle down. But no sooner that button of panic was pressed, he was into a very bad mode and very bad activity of the disease. This told us that if this is the temperament always, and this is what has happened now. Okay, there's one more experience which the doctor said that he was in a particular hospital, and in the same hospital somebody had expired. Okay, on the previous week. So the news of that itself, he was very, very upset. And this whole thing changed when he was shifted from that hospital to another hospital. Though he was under the same doctor, same team, but he was changed to another location, he was fine. Okay. So this data prompted me that there is something more, and we have to look for proper chronic picture. So again, keynotes are available to look at the case. But there are other characteristics as well, and keynotes really leads the way in guiding us, which you can see from the next repetition sheet.
Yeah.
So you can see phosphorus very prominent, and you are sure though locasis appears on the screen that locasis is not likely in the whole process. But I learned my lessons, and most of the time, of course, we have been doing this because most of the time we have not gone in that overconfident mode as we went with the Pune case. So we went to the whole case taking, went to the whole repetition, confirm and reconfirm details from the family about attachment, about being lovable, warm hugs, talking sweetly, jovial, tendency to panic in business as well as in family, petrified when he was in the hospital where a relative had died earlier. Okay, always very smiling. In Gujarati, they mentioned about him. His nature is such that he mari pade che bada mate. He would almost go to the extent of that he will die of exhaustion in doing things for us. That much loving and caring and attached, and star of every party, loves music a lot, short-tempered, but always for a very short time, spurts of anger. Okay. Otherwise, very, very sweet and nice towards others. Okay. Cheerful, never holding grudges, and craving for juicy fruits, perspiration data, the sleep position data. Luckily, together everything, like most of the cases that we need to do this. And with that, we recheck the repetition again and we're still confirming phosphorus. So after all these things, see, now we use the same keynotes for elimination. It makes your decision quite clear. Yes, you can see this patient in the whole light, the chronic picture, so close to phosphorus. And once you use the keynotes, you realize that even from the closely coming drugs, how everything is, cleared out. So using keynotes as elimination really, really helps you to make a better look at the possibilities of medicines from the totality and a more sure, confident decision making. It of course gives us a lot of speed also. So as you can see, these are the different values: CRP of 210, IL-6 of 85, DIM of 3540. So we started with phosphorus 0 by 1, TDS in dilution, seeing the patient being very oversensitive, hypersensitive state with respect to the CRP as well as the mental reactions. And we started improving from day one in all respects. Okay. This was a case which was anticipated by treating physician and chest physician to be going long, that he would require a long hospitalization. He's going to require oxygenator at home for long. Okay. His HRCT severity was 23 by 25. But as you can see, and before homeopathy medicine, when we saw the resolution is not so great. Okay. But in the discharge, you can see we already started improving very well. And as compared to the expectation, the lung function test appeared better. So from ICU into wards very quickly, then with oxygenator at home. Anticipated time of oxygenator use was 2 to 3 months. It did not even was required, not even for 2 weeks. And by the time we had 0 by 1 was exhausted, so we went to 0 by 3. And he was already on simple oxygen, and then very soon it came to meet me in the clinic without oxygen. There was a time when after discharge he was suspected to have mucormycosis because there was some sinusitis and dyslexis and hemorrhagic discharge, but it was ruled out with MRI. So the case did very well, and this is what is the reward of doing the work in consistent manner, with all grounds being taken care of. And of course, keynotes help you to look at the first look of possibilities of drugs, look at again at the full totality, and look at again at the time of decision making. And this does give you a lot of speed, a lot of more confidence in the whole process. A few more examples of keynote learning. Please have a look at this case. This is a child of 7 years who was brought for a cough presentation asthma going on for 3 years. And right now, this episode was going on for 3 months continuously. Okay, a lot of medicines have been tried. And just a short while of looking at the video would tell you. When if you look at the silent video, you can make out the same thing. Yeah, let's see.
Sir, you will have to, sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah, speed up, yeah. We just watched these, now we went on for longer. I'm cutting short the video because we have less time. So if you observe very carefully, okay, the characteristic, and you have to look at then the exact words, and then you look at the exact record. This is the process that we are just going to see in this case of an experience. we saw that the cough was alternating with the talk. No sooner she stopped talking, the cough would start again. As she will start talking, the cough would stop. This is patient who is requiring bronchodilators throughout the day. But when she starts talking, for a while, that cough stops, though she's breathless. Okay, this is difficult to find as a rubric. So we went on searching first cough alternating, then cough and talk just were put together. We took a replacement word for talk as loquacity, and then we found this rubric. Just a single drug in that rubric. Okay, and we confirm with Materia Medica source book, especially with Tyler's picture and picture in the Herring and Allen about cough. So the result in a day, okay, after Drosera. So this patient was with me for next 5 years. Anyway, so as you can see that, with one dose first day, there was improvement, and few more doses of Drosera required like that. And next 5 years, we saw the patient was quite good. So an eye for the keynote is connected to observation, and then an eye for searching away parallel rubric in the repertoire can make a sea of a difference, a big difference to what you're going to do in such cases. So there is a similar experience I had with another case of an outstation patient. This was in team with Dr. Mehta. This patient was somewhere in Karnataka. One of our ex-CMP doctor, her son, yeah. He had an acute pneumonia diagnosis confirmed with an X-ray, and he always used to have recurrent lower respiratory infection. He was on phosphorus as chronic also, and that is what was given in acute pneumonia also. So she described everything, and she was one of the very good students of CMP. I could not see any hole in the whole story where I could suggest anything better than phosphorus, but the patient was not acute. Now I was getting follow-ups on the phone, and I heard that first time it happened, it was a doubt in my mind, but it happened again on the second phone call, also the second day, that the child was with the patient mother. The child would cling to the mother, and I could hear the child's cough and moaning every time. But that twice it's happened that when they called up, and I could not hear that moaning. So I said, "Morning, come ho gaya, khasi come in." No, pata nahi, abhi thoda aisa hoga. And then I asked her to check, and that is the time she observed that the fever was rising. So when the fever was rising, the cough and moaning had suddenly stopped. So with just that feature, we looked at the repertoire. Okay, that when the fever comes, the cough ameliorations. And there is a drug, Oleum Jacoris. And we read through Oleum Jacoris literature, it's so much close to phosphorus. So a lot of things. See, I'm not talking about just keynote about cough amelioration with fever or cough alternating with fever. I'm also talking about that when you go to this experience, you go to then read Oleum Jacoris, and you'll be surprised to note about so much similarity between Oleum Jacoris and phosphorus. So one more keynote in my mind is about when I think of phosphorus, I must also keep in mind drugs like Oleum Jacoris. This is the way we have to build up. So this is not just a keynote about what is there in the repertoire, or not a keynote in the Materia Medica, but there's a keynote which evolves and develops in our mind. There's one more similar experience, one osteomyelitis case. You can see the picture before and the picture after. Yeah. This case, we were reading for which Ophidia drug to give because lachesis was seen in the repertoire, but the patient was too much of a gentleman and somebody was working for his a group of slum dwellers for their residents to be saved with a lot of dedication. So we went about reading, and in the readings for Naja, we found some very interesting thing about how even in the actual biological space, Asiatic cobras are reluctant to bite, and they don't bite so easily, even with an enemy. Even an intruder, they will first try to scare away and give false, strikes, and until really pressed for the wall, they would not bite and hurt the. Now, this is not seen with other snakes of similar genre, and that is what makes Naja different and unique. In the Naja provings reported in Allen's Encyclopedia, we find this interesting line: everything that was done in a wrong way, and it could not be rectified, and I felt I had some duty to perform. This was very similar to the close, the state of the patient that is. So you see, you are getting a symptom and its reflection in the source drug in the real biological space also. So that is how the keynote about Naja becomes etched in our mind. And we learn more and more about when you say Naja and lachesis are so apart. Naja is righteous, Naja is injustice fighter, Naja is not revengeful like lachesis, Naja is not like lachesis. It becomes more and more clear to us. I also would like to share one small quick case of mucormycosis by my colleague Dr. Devadikar, who treated recently, and he told me about how he came to a very interesting prescription of verbascum. See, the patient was presenting with these symptoms: pain all around the orbit. He was rolling in pain bed with pain, numbness of the cheekbone, numbness radiating the teeth, and the sensation as if the teeth was loosened. Okay, this patient had received full-fledged treatment and was really bad. We are not showing the pictures which he had because of it's a YouTube presentation. We don't know to see the face, and without showing the face, we couldn't have shown the reason. But the MRI was confirming, and the CT scan was confirming about the mucormycosis. And how did he strike upon verbascum? From that picture in Boric, if you just read the picture in Boric, you will be surprised to see the exact similarity. Now, he had read verbascum for some cancer case few years back when he was seeing a case with Dr. Kasat. Though they were surprised getting some verbascum is a drug known for female dysmenorrhea. He had used it in one cancer case in the ward, and at this juncture, he suddenly saw the picture. So, all that sea of data aside, and he could match the similarity and get a very quick result with verbascum 30 TDS. Yeah. Worthwhile to go to Boric verbascum to really understand the points. But I would just like to add this about how we evolve keynotes in our mind, evolve the data bank of keynotes, and how do you use and how do you apply for. So there are different methods of forming totality frames: portrait, repertorial, non-repertorial, including keynotes, kingdoms, families, sexualization, synthetic. But it all depends on the type of characteristics that we get in a case. And we have to focus on the characteristic in this manner. If you look at this picture, this rock on the sea in Burmania, okay, just look at it a little different with the reflection of the mirror image. Characteristics are like this in cases. Okay, this is how we see many characteristics, and then some of them turn keynotes for you. What do these keynotes do for you? I learned with my short call experiences with teachers, ML Davde sir in the beginning, when I used to call along with Diwai sir, my calls and crisis calls for Dixit sir, Kumar sir, Barwalia sir, Kasit sir, Dr. Krishna Mehta, Dr. Shankar in some cases, and recently Sansakar sir who helped me with a lot of COVID cases, including in my own family. And there is a need for quicker case solving. It happens to you even if you are in a full clinic. And I heard about such, experiences. There is a government hospital in Andhra Pradesh where the doctor told us they see 200 to 300 new patients every day. How do they solve these cases? He had said that he had made a classification of common remedies for some common conditions, and he would guide them to first look at keynotes while they are doing the cases. 70% cases were possible to solve very fast, which gave them time to devote time to other 30% cases which required more time. So friends, that is one of the prominent role which keynotes can play. but keynotes are what you learn from symptomatology and what you learn with your analysis evaluation, not in a fanciful way. Yeah? So the basic literature in symptomatology guides you to keynotes, and once you become conscious about how to perceive keynotes, you can utilize your readings from all these books, like keynotes books are there by different authors. They help you a lot. It's not just a method of forming totality with 3 keynotes, as LNS say. You can use keynote as a guide while you are applying any of the approaches. So if you undoubted powerful characteristics which can qualify to be keynote, this is first part. When you have undoubted powerful characteristics which can qualify to be a keynote, okay. Then using top 3 keynotes as a syndrome for elimination makes the whole prescription quick, easy, sure, and more grounded. This is helpful even with any of the approaches that you are applying. And keynotes are man-made when you have focused case taking, when you have good use of repetitive rubrics, when you go on learning the experience and logic from different stalwarts, because those guiding lights are very important. The importance of recent symptoms, the importance of language of disease, the importance of body language, and remember the caution. Slow down when you cannot find a telling story. If your balance sheet is not telling of what is there in the case with what is there in the drug. So the discipline to use keynote is that case taking will facilitate and will give you very good attentive case taking, but underlying mental and physical state must corroborate and the background susceptibility must tally. Yes. So then time dimension and this attentiveness, glass pieces will turn into kaleidoscope designs, 101%. Use more focused inquiry, then you will not miss these accessory symptoms. I often been guiding in the OPD case papers as well as in my colleagues. Some of the accessory symptoms, as Hahnemann has written in Organ on Effulgence, they require focused, skilled inquiry. Otherwise, patient will never mention about them on his own. And they can be very nice, almost at the level of objective data, and very, very sure, hard data in our current language as strong characteristics and some keywords. So this awareness basically helps change our case taking. So for that, we need to learn from all the path-breaking physicians as many cases as possible. With every good experience, successful curative case, every good successful palliation, when you hear the process, thinking process in detail, your mind will open up towards more and more characteristics, more and more keynotes, more and more rubrics, more and more faster solving of cases for you. Okay. And remember, rubrics matter a lot. Eyes burning chill before intent is only 1 drug, but in the Nimishs references, there are 4 drugs. So use best resources, use the best repertoire resources when you want to refer for such keynotes, okay, so that you will be in the right consideration in the drugs. Awareness, consciousness helps a lot to become proactive, and it gives you much quicker prescribing, okay. The recent characteristics, and this approach will help you a lot because in COVID times, we are not going to sit with the patient for longer. We must be able to control our exposure time. On the phone calls, it's not possible sometimes to talk so long. So the inadequacy of data sometimes and less security or confidence and totality sometimes can be very, very well improved with keynotes in the picture. So it enhances your searching spirit. When you're doing the case taking, you use a sharper analysis evaluation with this consciousness, and you learn more and more. See, it guides you to learn more and more from the repertory softwares. It will guide you to more and more source books reference also, because I tell you, the spirit is undoubtedly going to fuel a lot of the process in you, which is required for case taking or solving, prescribing, which is more sure, more powerful, and quicker than what it will be otherwise. These are some of the books which are my favorite books. There are many sources for learning keynotes. You require your inspiration, concepts, ideas from books like Boger, Philosophy of Healing, and collected articles. And you require books like Pulford's keynotes, apart from Allen, and Franz Van Buren's Synoptic Materia Medica, Franz Van Buren Concordances, and so on. Yes. So for proactive homeopathy, I would like to add, never miss all the good therapeutic ideas which can be compatible with homeopathy, like vitamins, like diet guidance, exercise, physiotherapy, and a little casual small talks. Okay? Ultimately, remember, you are not just taking cases and just prescribing for them. We are trying to flower a person. Okay? A patient needs to flower if he has to really reach the best state of health that is possible for him. So, my take-home message is that be alert for keynotes, grow your awareness through various information and experiences. It will automatically develop the sight to see the keynotes. And then don't use this like a shortcut method, use it for a proactive homeopathy where you are able to prescribe surely and rapidly. I would like to express my gratitude to everybody again. Thank you so much for giving a patient hearing. And you can definitely move in for all the questions and doubts. Thank you very much. Dr. Pipin, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for this wonderful presentation. I will now request Dr. Bipin Jain, sir, to kindly take up the Q&A.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. And it was a fantastic flow of ideas and the concepts which we witnessed from Dr. Nimish, and his experience and his journey of prescribing. Now I would put it as a prescribing because this is a dynamic journey. It is not a static, like keynotes, which are not static. They are dynamic. And why do I say they are dynamic? Because if you read all the books which mentions key, each author had their own perspectives in defining keys. You can read Gunsey, you can go to Pulford, you can go to Allen, and then finally you look at the Boger. So they had their own philosophy, their own concepts, and their own experiences to bring and integrate those into keynote. And the today's presentation, I mean, if you look at those cases which had prescribing totalities, and you can definitely see that how an physician is able to integrate key concepts on which that case can be defined and can be solved. So when we are looking at that one symptom which can be a keynote in a one case may not be a keynote in another case. So keynotes are not ready-made in that sense. They have to be made in an integrated way to understand the core idea of the case and which define characteristics of those case. Even a location of a remedy can be a characteristic keynote for prescription, and even a pathogenesis in that sense can become a keynote, or in the evolution or the concept or time, the onset, duration, progress, what you saw in aconite case, that was a keynote there. Or you can experience the pulsatilla case, or how he has related with those family relationship. That also can be a perspective of the key ideas on which you define the central ideas and go to aconite. The pyrogen case also opened up from those perspectives that offensiveness by itself. Now it can be laid back to the septic state in that sense, and how body is responding to that septicemia, that itself can be a part of keynote, and the foulness. So all these keynotes are defined, structured, and evolved through a central theme of the case, and on what basis those cases state that sometimes the mental characteristics or the mental key can become an prescribing. So if you go through all the cases which had a different core ideas, and through which how an physician's journey to evolve keynote, if we started with MLD sir's case, I mean, those were from a one perspective, having a flatulence is a common symptom. I mean, you have a digestive, but having a flatulence with other mental state and the modalities, then that becomes a key to the remedy. So from conceptually, if we look at, I mean, we have to understand one thing is what is a central idea of the case. How do we pick up those keys which will unfold and which will bring in a rhythm in that music. So that was a one idea which we all must evolve out of these experiences. And the other important aspect is we must have insight on all these people who have written Keynote, how they have understood the whole idea, integrated them and conceptualized. That is why if you look at Gunsy's Keynote, or you look at Alan's Keynote, the way they have written and presented their ideas of Keynote, which contrast with the Keynote of Boger synoptic key. So until and unless we understand these different approaches, Keynote is not just picking up three symptoms and integrating. So the whole presentation has told us that Keynote is not a simple idea of picking up symptoms. It has also told us that Keynote is a journey of a case with the journey of a physician and his integration and abstractions of those remedies, as well as of the patient, and his abstraction of those authors and the references which we are making. Now, the last case of Borig, the Keynote which he has mentioned, Borig has never said about Keynote. But then the reference by itself, picking up those symptoms is a remedy where we land up, and what value that has. So all the ideas which he has propagated needs to be understood from those perspective. And I think from that perspective, this was a powerful presentation and his journey overall. So that is where we need to, every one of us will take some time to digest all this and understand those different concepts and conceptualize. So I am really very happy to see that we are able to understand Keynote on a larger perspective and not in a very, very brief and specific focused perspective. And that is what even I have experienced when I was talking to Dr. L.M. Khan sir at Kolkata. And when he told me that I have prescribed on these three symptoms, and then when I went on talking to him, then he went on describing how patient was and what was his life space. And then I realized that it is not he is using ready-made things, but he has made those things. And when, how, where were the questions which Dr. Nimish has tried to answer through his cases. So I would, there are not many questions I can see. So I think people are still digesting the flood which they are experiencing. There were few things. One was, somebody has asked about aconite and sulfur, because aconite is an acute of sulfur. So was that relationship was thought of? Dr. Nimish?
Not exactly, because we were focused on to see the exact characteristic which evolved at that juncture. So we of course check that you always check that the previous prescription is not inimical when you are giving the next. But because I was not convinced at all about sulfur being the remedy of the case, there was no question of relating with sulfur and aconite. And as I saw the case was something from a ranunculus family, and then which drug of the ranunculus family.
There was also one observation, Dr. Nimish, about the use of tuberculinum in that aconite case.
Yes, yes.
If you look at the blood picture,
yes,
you don't see WBC increased with the platelet going down, because bone marrow does not respond in this differential way. So was there a problem with the platelet count by a laboratory, which is very much possible sometimes?
I agree.
Yeah.
That was the first thing which was checked.
The bone marrow will not respond in this contradictory way. There should have been further lowering down of WBC there.
I'll share with you what was our experience at the time. We were getting many cases of dengue at the same time around that time in the epidemic, and we had formed a practice of doing manual count platelets for these cases. So all these cases, we were getting cross-checking done, not just with the auto-analyzer, but one more lab doing the manual platelet count. Because what you were saying was a doubt even in our mind at the time. So it was confirmed. In fact, the other lab where we had sent for confirmation had given a count of 6,000 plus, not even 7,000. So, and this doubt was there in our mind. So we talked to one of the medicine person at the time in the campus, and he said it speaks of a certain differential, not very competent immune response, that though the WBC count is improved so well, and of course his reading was that probably the patient is not hydrated well. So that was one of the reasons.
Yeah.
So his suggestion was to give a lot of IV fluids, Now we went for, because we were very sure of the symptomatic way in which it was everything happened. So we did not go for IV fluids. We remained with oral rehydration and we went with our medicines.
Because because sometimes, you know, if you look at the literature, they say once the WBC count starts improving, that means you are on a safer ground as far as dengue is concerned, and not the platelet.
Correct. Yeah, so these are all the, basically see, we are not talking about right now the dengue case being a very, very extraordinary milestone result. It's dengue cases were improving with all of us in that fashion. The focus was that, you know, keynotes are subtly there in every picture. The patient is exuberating the keynote. Yes, if you see this, the patient always exuberates the keynote. You just need to look at it smartly and then use it very smartly. Then it can be a very able assistant in giving you a lot of efficiency. And
for that, you need a detailed workout to start with. If you don't form that habit of detailed working out to start your career, you will really fall flat.
Exactly.
That is why this is a dynamic, evolving phenomena within ourselves as well as within patient and in the literature. So if we are able to match those integrations, then we are at a right junction. Otherwise, we will fall flat, because to understand what forms a core and a key, it takes some years with a lot of hard work and the background of working with the processes which has standard way laid down in Organon as well as by our masters.
Yes, I'll agree, Dr. Vipin. We really require a workshop level work to learn from each other for this and getting more insights and more reflections, so we can polish the windows within ourselves to apply it better.
Yes. This was a really wonderful journey, Dr. Nimish, with you. I mean, we had a great time interacting, and we also have learned a lot in the process. And I hope, I can request audience to send questions later on also, which I can pass it on to you.
Yes, thank you. That will be nice.
And I don't see major questions. So still they are in the process. Yes, Dr. Keyur, there are no questions. I can also see. So whether our, those who wants to ask questions directly can unmute and ask questions directly to Nimish sir. There is no problem.
Yeah, they can. If anyone has to ask a question via audio, they can raise their hand. We will unmute them.
Zen, the great philosopher from China, has said, if after a session there are no questions, it has two meanings. I hope we are in the luckier meaning.
Bhavik has asked a question about aconite.
Aconite case has like the typical mental symptoms, because we had that pulsatilla. That is what I said. That was the movement from pulsatilla to aconite, but it did not have aconite mental state of panic.
It came up after tuberculin, incidentally, as I told you, So now we don't know whether that part of the reaction was somewhere suppressed within himself that we could not elicit, or it was because of his timid nature. But on the day post tuberculin, the next day after tuberculin, it was very evident.
Okay. See, we'll have to do a detailed remedy response.
See, I'll just like to share one simple thing so that all the listeners also will be able to digest their experience a little better. See, for this purpose of sharing the range of experiences, we wanted to take a certain number of cases. So every case, we have not kept all the details which would have allowed you to work on these like a workshop or a symposium. Even, for example, this mental state about aconite after tuberculinum, that kind of thing. There is a lot of data in the case, actually. This is all data which is cramped into a small presentation, a compact presentation. Actually, it is more of a stimulation to think from my side. The preparation of this presentation itself has been very, very intriguing, and lots of ups and downs with Dr. Vipin and Kumar sir guiding me. And what I wish that not only me, but we all become more active participant to the journey of achieving much more in our practice through this consciousness. Okay, the consciousness is not to use keynotes as shortcuts, but at the same time not to get intimidated by that keynotes cannot be prescribed by other people. It is rather to become comfortable with the idea, become attentive, more attentive in our case taking, okay, so that you pick up every keynote and then use it smartly. And then use it with discipline, use it with all the concern and balance for a proper case taking, proper total.
So finally, one question has come up, Dr. Nimish.
Okay, nice.
Symptom which is symptom which is hard data will be more reliable keynote or the interpretations we made?
I would not like to make any equation like that. Hard data is always much more reliable component of a totality, but the depth of abstraction can be very, very powerful. If you are like that first case of ML Dawle, sir, if you see an aristocratic vision, a Maharashtrian caterer in a Maharashtrian area thinks of a costly dish and catering a royal touch. Okay, sir had seen these details and there's a depth of perceiving. So if your keynote has depth of the what Boger writes, the vital experience of mind and body put together. If your keynote is carrying that depth, then that keynote can be more powerful than a hard data also. So it will all depend upon how much you are able to put into that keynote in your perceiving. And that will be connected to how you look at the case, how you experience the case. And for that, you must have a proper, deep, complete experience of the case and not a superficial, upar say, here and there, hush hush.
The escapists are there. Some word of wisdom from him.
He was in and out, so I don't think that he will be.
No, but his idea of keynotes and using,
No, but he's not. I haven't mentioned he's not. He's not around.
He's not there. So I don't see more questions. I would request Tiwari sir to have a final comments on this. Tiwari sir, can you just call him up? I think he's there in a.
हेलो
Yeah. हाँ सर जरा वीडियो ऑन करना.
एक मिनट मैंने अनम्यूट किया है वीडियो.
हाँ यस सर, आपकी आवाज बड़े अच्छे से आ रही है सर, बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है सुन के.
थैंक यू. बोलने का मौका दिया इसलिए आपको बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.
अरे गुड सर. आप
डॉक्टर निमिश का जो जर्नी था, वेरी लॉन्ग जर्नी. Actually, he demonstrated first 6 aphorisms of organon. Being an organon professor, basic philosophy of case taking, case receiving, observation, unprejudiced observer, and how to take the case of fever, especially the cases what you selected. You had to take the unmodified picture. You have to take case taking aparixiya state. You should have a proper knowledge of repertory, especially in fever cases. He also gave the example of Dr. Kothari, who worked hard on this. And if you take those symptoms, characteristics, aparixiya, chill, fever, heat, you can learn materia medica. And how to be a master of materia medica, how you should get that clarity of the case receiving, what is the meaning of case, and the title. Keynotes are not available in books, but to make and perceive keynotes in the case. For example, MLD sir का, DD sir का और डॉक्टर कुमार ने बहुत अच्छा होमवर्क किया 1930 से लेकर के 2021 तक. And those person lucky who was there in the ICR. ICR जो ट्रेनिंग देता है वो प्रैक्टिस बेस्ड देता है. And what you done in the practice and how you relate to the philosophy, and there is a union between philosophy and practice, and how to maximize learning from each case. जो निमिष ने जो एग्जाम्पल दिए, पैरोजन का दिया, फॉस्फोरस दिया, natrum force and natrum more. And he says we are all learners and learn from each other. And whenever we find difficulty, we should consult our seniors. Seniors are all available. जैसे वो केस में natrum force and natrum more में potency selection, 50 मिलीस्मोल का भी यूज करना है, क्या करना. कंसल्ट कर सर रहते थे तो और अच्छा होता था. और जो आपने कोविड का केस लिया, मलेरिया का लिया, ये सब ठीक है, मगर आपका परसीविंग क्या है? There are two things, perceiving and demand of homeopathic practice. निमिष ने पासिंग वर्ड से अनप्रेजुडिस्ड ऑब्जर्वर बोला, our knowledge make us prejudice, our knowledge make us unprejudiced. तो ये प्रेजेंटेशन बहुत अच्छा लगा मुझे. और जो निमिष ने थीम रखा, we are all learners. He was not talking as a professor, he was not talking as so-called. So learning from the case and what is the case, ये सब चीजें उसने बहुत अच्छे से बोली. और आई एम हैप्पी कि ICR फैमिली से जो लोग हैं और लोग व्हाट्सएप पे बात करते हैं, वो इस तरह से आएंगे, अपनी लर्निंग शेयर करेंगे और बिपिन सर उन सबको मौका देंगे. तो ICR फैमिली इज ग्रेट, वेदर वी आर इन कॉन्टैक्ट और नॉट कॉन्टैक्ट. और जर्नी 1930 से लेके 221 तक आए अपन. नॉलेजेबल जो अफोलिज्म 3 में लिखा है, तो आज का नॉलेज क्या है, क्या क्या नॉलेज चाहिए अपने को, क्लिनिकल नॉलेज, पैथोलॉजिकल, सब 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 चीजें आई हैं उसमें. और सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट केस रिसीविंग, एक्यूट केस एंड क्रॉनिक केस. एक्यूट केस में कैसे कैरेक्टरिस्टिक आप देखते हैं, क्रॉनिक केस में क्रॉस सेक्शन स्टडी, लॉन्जिट्यूडिनल एनालिसिस एंड डिमांड ऑफ होम्योपैथिक प्रैक्टिस. होम्योपैथिक प्रैक्टिस मतलब साउंड सेंसेस, जो स्मेल जो आती है वो फिजिशियन कैसे नोट करता है, पेशेंट कैसा बोल रहा है. माइंड जानने के लिए माइंड के बारे में क्वेश्चंस नहीं पूछना है, उसके बिहेवियर से उसकी सब चीजें आती हैं. और क्योर कब होती है, और मिशन ऑफ द फिजिशियन. आई थिंक वेल डन. आई एम हैप्पी दैट आवर पीपल आर डूइंग गुड वर्क. लोगों ने सवाल भी अच्छे पूछे हैं, मगर सवाल और अच्छे पूछे जा सकते थे या शेयरिंग हो सकती थी. तो आई थिंक और भी आगे हैं. और एक संडे में भी ICR फैमिली से कोई होगा या मीडिया से होगा. पर अपना सबका ट्रेनिंग बेस्ड ICR ट्रेनिंग है. MLDHI में अपन जो एजुकेशन करते हैं उसमें अपन एग्जाम पास हो जाते हैं, बार बार मैंने बोला है, वो भी जरूरी है, मगर ऑर्गेनॉन, मटेरिया मेडिका, रिपोर्टिंग एंड क्लिनिकल मेडिसिन, ये सब होता है तब वो फन बढ़ता है. थैंक यू वेरी मच. आई डोंट वांट टू टेक मोर टाइम, नहीं तो मैं बोलता जाऊंगा, आपका टाइम ओवरलोड हो जाएगा. थैंक यू बिपिन, थैंक यू कुमार सर, जो आपने बैकग्राउंड खड़ा किया, रजिस्टर में जाकर के केस कैसा होता है. 4 लाइन लिखा तो भी केस हो गया, पूरा 10 हिस्ट्री बढ़ के लिखा और लिखा तो भी केस नहीं होगा. थैंक यू वेरी मच.
Thank you, sir, for the words of wisdom to all of us, and good integration of what Nimish sir has presented. And we hope to continue this journey and interactions with each other to get more insight into our journey as a healer. And we have, this whole month we are going to celebrate as a, sharing of learning. And all 4 Sundays we will have presentations. So next Sunday we have got 3 wonderful presentations based on the themes. The detail will be put on WhatsApp or an email with the timing. So I hope to meet all of you again in the next week at the same time at 10 a.m. And we promise to finish it at the same time when we are finishing today. So we will not extend the time. And thank you, Nimish, for completing the things in a in a record time with so much of data. And I hope we will continue to adhere to the time discipline. Thank you all. Kumar sir, anything else you want to announce or say?
No. This is enough. No.
Okay. So thanks. And thank you all. And we'll meet you in the